The night I finally decided to tell her the truth, my hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the letter I had rewritten a dozen times. For 3 years I had carried a quiet storm in my chest, pretending it was nothing, pretending friendship was enough. But that evening in a small park in Portland, under a sky heavy with rain and regret, I realized that silence can sometimes hurt more than rejection. I gathered every ounce of courage I had left to confess my feelings to her. And when I finally did, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered the words that would haunt me forever: "Why didn't you say sooner?" Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love that comes too late, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in fate, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. My name is Michael Carter, and for most of my life I was the kind of person who stayed quiet when it mattered most. I worked at a small bookstore in downtown Portland, the kind that smelled like old pages and rainy afternoons. It was the sort of place where time moved slowly, where strangers came in searching for stories that made them feel less alone. That was where I first met Sarah Whitmore. She walked in one autumn afternoon 3 years earlier, her hair damp from the rain, carrying the soft kind of smile that made the whole room feel warmer. She asked me for a recommendation, something hopeful but honest, something that didn't pretend life was perfect. I remember thinking that no book could possibly capture the kind of quiet sincerity I saw in her eyes. But instead of saying anything clever, I simply handed her a novel and stumbled through a nervous explanation. From that day forward, she became a regular visitor. Sometimes she came for books, sometimes for coffee, but mostly it seemed she came to talk. We would spend hours discussing stories, dreams, childhood memories, and the strange ways life changes people. She told me about growing up in Ohio, about moving across the country to start fresh, about the loneliness that sometimes followed her through quiet nights in the city. Somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I fell in love with her. But love is a strange thing when it lives inside a timid heart. Every time I thought about telling her, doubt wrapped around my thoughts like fog. I convinced myself that our friendship was too precious to risk. I told myself that she probably saw me as nothing more than the quiet guy at the bookstore. And so day after day, season after season, I said nothing. Life, however, never waits for perfect timing. One winter evening Sarah told me she had started seeing someone. His name was Jonathan Reed, a software engineer who had recently moved to Portland. She spoke about him with uncertainty, as if she was still trying to figure out her feelings. I smiled, nodded, and pretended I was happy for her, even though something inside my chest felt like it was slowly breaking apart. Months passed. I watched their relationship grow from cautious beginnings into something serious. She talked about their plans, their trips, their future possibilities. Each conversation felt like a quiet reminder of the words I had never spoken. Yet despite everything, our friendship remained strong. We still met for coffee, still shared stories, still laughed about small things. But there was always a shadow hanging over my heart, the unspoken truth that refused to disappear. Then one evening she told me something that changed everything. She and Jonathan were planning to move to Chicago. The words felt like a door slamming shut on 3 years of silence. I went home that night and sat at my kitchen table staring at a blank sheet of paper. For hours I wrestled with regret, fear, and the crushing weight of missed chances. Eventually I realized something painful but undeniable. If I never told her the truth, I would carry that regret for the rest of my life. So I wrote a letter. I rewrote it again and again, trying to capture feelings that had grown quietly for years. When I finished, the paper was wrinkled from my nervous hands, but the words were finally honest. The next evening I asked her to meet me at the park near the river, a place where we had shared countless peaceful conversations. The sky was dark with rain clouds, and the wind carried the smell of wet leaves. My heart pounded so loudly that I was certain she could hear it. As I spoke, the words came slowly at first, then all at once, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. I told her how much her friendship meant to me, how her kindness had changed my life, and how somewhere along the way my feelings had grown into something deeper than I had ever expected. When I finished, the world seemed to hold its breath. Sarah stood there quietly, her eyes filled with emotion I couldn't quite understand. For a moment I thought I had destroyed everything. Then tears rolled down her cheeks as she gently took the letter from my trembling hands. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and tenderness and said the words that cut deeper than any rejection ever could. She said she had once wondered if I felt the same way she did years earlier. She said there had been a time when she had hoped I might say something. And then she asked the question that echoed through the quiet park like a whisper of fate. Why didn't you say sooner? In that moment I realized that sometimes love doesn't fail because it wasn't real. Sometimes it fails because fear arrives before courage. Sarah eventually moved to Chicago with Jonathan. Our lives drifted into different directions, carried by time and choices that couldn't be undone. But every now and then, when the rain falls softly against the bookstore windows, I remember that evening in the park and the lesson it left behind. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. And before we reach the ending, here's a special request. Comment below with the words, "Speak before it's too late," if you believe life is too short to hide your feelings. Because the truth is simple, and sometimes painfully beautiful. Love doesn't always need perfect timing. What it needs most is courage before the moment disappears. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need the reminder that the bravest thing a person can do is speak their heart before silence steals the chance forever.